Ancient Egypt, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in history, had a justice system that was deeply intertwined with the will of the pharaoh. The pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was considered a divine figure, the living god on earth, whose power and authority were absolute. This divine authority was reflected in the harsh punishments meted out to those who defied the laws or displeased the pharaoh. This was a particularly cruel form of justice, as it not only punished the criminal physically but also socially ostracized them. With the loss of a hand or foot, the individual could no longer participate fully in society, and they were effectively marked as an outcast. This form of punishment served to show the consequences of defying the law and the authority of the pharaoh. Ancient Egyptians believed in the cosmic order of justice, balance, and truth. Those who violated the laws of Ma'at were believed to be subjected to the wrath of the gods. Public trials were often held where the accused were forced to stand before judges who were believed to act on behalf of the gods. In some cases, the guilty party would be subjected to a trial by ordeal, such as being submerged in water. The punishments not only served as a way to enforce law and order, but were also deeply tied to the divine right of kings and the gods. However, unlike modern prisons, Egyptian prisons were far harsher and less about rehabilitation and more about inflicting suffering. Prisoners were often subjected to overcrowded, unsanitary conditions, with little to no food or medical care. Many prisoners died from disease or starvation, and the brutal nature of the Egyptian prison system was a powerful deterrent for anyone considering breaking the law. Those found guilty of certain offenses, such as adultery, could lose everything: their property, their family, and their status within society. Adulterers were not only publicly humiliated but often ostracized, and in some cases, their families were forced to disown them. The ancient Egyptian concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order was central to the law. However, it wasn't just the act of execution that sent a message. It was the manner in which the death was carried out. This was a form of spiritual punishment in which the individual's name and memory were erased from history. It was believed that the pharaoh's power was divinely granted, and therefore his decisions were final. The punishments carried out by the pharaoh were seen as necessary to maintain the social order and ensure the prosperity of Egypt. In the end, the pharaoh's wrath was not just about punishment. It was about ensuring that the divine order of Egypt was upheld, no matter the cost. Monuments, inscriptions, and statues would be defaced, and the person would be removed from the official records. This punishment not only deprived the individual of their earthly existence but also condemned them to an eternity of obscurity, where their name would be forgotten forever. This act of erasure was meant to reflect the godly power of the pharaoh, who could control not just life but also the afterlife. Public executions were often accompanied by ceremonial rituals, where priests or officials would invoke the gods, asking for the soul of the deceased to be judged and purified. This process symbolized the return to order, as the gods were believed to be the ultimate judges, and the pharaoh acted as their intermediary. The pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Ma'at, was responsible for maintaining this divine order. Punishments, therefore, were seen as a way of restoring balance. When it was disrupted by criminal behavior, the gods were believed to intervene directly in the lives of the people, and the pharaoh's decisions were seen as carrying out the will of the divine. This belief in divine justice made the pharaoh's punishments not just a matter of state law but of spiritual significance. In this way, punishment went beyond physical injury and was designed to strip the individual of everything that gave them value in Egyptian society. The idea of imprisonment itself was a symbol of social degradation, with the pharaoh's officials serving as the ultimate enforcers of law and order. Those accused of defying the gods were often subjected to extreme psychological pressure. For example, in some cases, individuals who were caught committing acts of blasphemy or questioning the pharaoh's divine authority were forced to stand trial in front of the entire community. The trial was not just a formality but an intense public shaming, designed to break the individual's spirit and force them to publicly admit their wrongdoing. The system of punishment in Egypt was designed to maintain a strict social hierarchy and ensure that no one defied the pharaoh's will, which was considered the will of the gods themselves. The pharaoh was believed to be the living god, and any challenge to this divine rule was considered not only a personal affront, but a direct challenge to the gods themselves. Magic was believed to be dangerous and disruptive, and those accused of practicing dark arts were often executed in a ritualistic manner. Many of these executions took place near temples or sacred sites, with the public watching as the individual was punished for defying the natural order. If they survived, they were deemed innocent. If they drowned, they were considered guilty, as the gods had rejected them. One of the most feared aspects of the ancient Egyptian justice system was the punishment for treason, a crime considered one of the most serious offenses against the state. The execution of nobles or individuals involved in political conspiracies often involved incredibly elaborate and public punishments. The pharaoh's authority was absolute, and anyone who threatened his reign, regardless of their social status, could expect to face the full wrath of the Egyptian justice system. Beheadings were common in these instances, and the head of the traitor would often be displayed publicly as a warning to anyone considering betraying the pharaoh. This served as a clear message that no one, not even the most powerful, was above the law. Though it was not as widely used as other forms of punishment, it was occasionally used for criminals who were deemed to be too dangerous or disruptive to the social order. The ancient Egyptians took property and wealth very seriously, and theft was viewed as an attack on the social order. The Pharaoh, as the divine ruler, was considered the intermediary between the gods and the people. To insult or offend the gods was considered a crime against both the divine and earthly authority. Mutilation, including the cutting off of the tongue or ears, was sometimes used to punish those who were found guilty of blasphemy. The punishment was meant to prevent further insults to the gods and ensure that no one would ever question the Pharaoh's divine right to rule. The Pharaoh's officials and soldiers would often patrol the streets and marketplaces to ensure that theft did not disrupt the peace. Anyone caught stealing, particularly from the Pharaoh or the temples, could expect severe punishment, often in front of a crowd, to further humiliate the criminal. The victim would be nailed or bound to a cross, left to die a slow and agonizing death, often in a public space. The purpose of this form of execution was not just to kill but to serve as a warning to others who might consider defying the Pharaoh's authority. In this horrific punishment, the victim's skin would be removed, either while they were still alive or after death. This was considered one of the most severe forms of justice and was used to ensure that the transgressor would suffer both physically and symbolically. Those accused of plotting against the Pharaoh or attempting to overthrow his reign faced brutal and often fatal consequences. The typical punishment for treason was execution, usually through decapitation. However, in cases where the Pharaoh wanted to make an example of the accused, they could face public execution, which would serve to instill fear in the populace and reinforce the Pharaoh's absolute control. Another infamous punishment was amputation. Those found guilty of theft or serious crimes often had their hands or feet cut off as a form of punishment. Flaying was also a gruesome form of punishment used in ancient Egypt, particularly for those who committed heinous crimes or acts of blasphemy against the gods or the Pharaoh. For lesser crimes, individuals might be subjected to flogging, a common punishment across many ancient civilizations. In Egypt, public flogging was a frequent punishment for offenses like insulting authority or violating social norms. The victim would be stripped of their clothing and whipped in front of a crowd, enduring physical pain and humiliation. This public spectacle was not only a form of punishment but also a means of maintaining social control, reinforcing the importance of obedience to the Pharaoh's laws. While physical punishment was common, the Pharaoh's justice system also relied on the concept of divine writ. Crucifixion, a punishment most commonly associated with the Romans, also had its origins in ancient Egypt. Theft, a common crime in ancient Egypt, was met with strict punishment, including public amputation or death for repeated offenders. Blasphemy or insulting the gods was another offense that could lead to a horrific punishment. As we continue to explore the brutal justice system of ancient Egypt, it becomes clear that the Pharaoh's power over life and death was absolute. One of the most feared forms of punishment was imprisonment in the Pharaoh's prisons. In the cases of high-ranking criminals or political offenders, the Pharaoh could exercise absolute power. For those accused of witchcraft or heretical behavior, execution was swift and often gruesome. While the physical punishments in ancient Egypt were horrific, the social consequences of breaking the law were just as devastating. Additionally, there was a form of mental punishment that was unique to the Egyptian legal system. The Pharaoh's justice system was deeply intertwined with the religious beliefs of the people. In the case of serious crimes, such as high treason or rebellion, the Pharaoh would often pass a death sentence. One of the most symbolic punishments in ancient Egypt was the breaking of the soul, a punishment reserved for the most serious offenders. Despite the harshness of the justice system in ancient Egypt, the system was highly structured and organized.